Welcome, Chappelle, right? Welcome to your very first flipped lesson, right? Welcome to my flipped classroom. Welcome to everything. Very, very impressed with y'all today. Y'all actually came in, sat down, got some stuff done. I was very impressed. Feel free to talk a little bit more. I know some people were a little bit angsty today, but you know what? It's the first day of school, so I completely understand. But today we already started learning a little bit of stuff in class, and as I said, you're going to have your first flipped class, and so here it is, right? So we're going to get started off talking about some of these ancient civilizations we began to talk about, because where we started in class today was the very beginning of human history, right? We started off talking about and discussing the very oldest of the old when it comes to human history, right? We talked about going all the way back to when human beings were literally evolving from apes, right? Like Australopithecus, Homo habilis, right? We talked about the stances of people and how they began to evolve and begin to operate upright, use tools and things like that. And then we talked about the big difference between our two eras, Paleolithic and Neolithic, and we discussed how Homo sapiens evolved from Homo sapiens evolved from Homo sapiens Neanderthal, Adultu, and all these other different forms of human life. But a big thing we haven't discussed yet is when and where this whole Neolithic Revolution happened. Now, we did discuss Paleolithic people in class, though. We talked about how Paleolithic people are hunter-gatherers, they're nomadic, they're people that move from place to find food, right? So usually when you think of nomads, you're coming to mind, you're Bedouins, or what's coming to mind as well is things Bedouins, or the Native American tribes in North America were semi-nomadic, right? So this idea of following your game or following something to hunt and foraging for food, right? Talk about hunter-gatherers, and gender division of labor also came up as well. Now, the big thing, though, going into it that we need to talk about this evening is we need to talk about the Neolithic Revolution, and then we're also going to jump over into discussing some of the earliest civilizations. Probably mostly we're going to get into Mesopotamia, right? So now, the big thing, though, that we got to, when discussing the Neolithic Revolution is you have to understand that this started right around circa 8,000 BC, right? So 8,000 BC, 8,000 years before the birth of Christ, right? And again, when we talked about this in class, you could also say BCE, before Common Era, right? So you need to be ready to see those things, because sometimes in excerpts or whatever on tests, somebody might say CE, somebody might say AD, somebody might say BC, somebody might say BCE. You just need to know that there's different systems for it, right? But around 8,000 BC, which is what we're going to use right now, the Neolithic Revolution is going to happen. So people are going to go from being old Stone Age individuals to being new Stone Age individuals, right? They're going to go from being nomadic hunter-gatherers to being what is known as sedentary, all right? So thing I need you to write down right now, write down the word sedentary, right? S-E-D-E-N-T-E-R-Y, sedentary. Underline that, highlight that, and put an equal sign next to it. We're going to define that word really quick, okay? But a development turned people from being nomadic hunter-gatherers and actually made them sedentary. The word sedentary means not moving, right? Non-nomadic now. You are staying in one place. You are existing in this place. You are creating a civilization in an area that is now where you live and you do not leave, right? So what do you think could have been the thing that was invented around 8,000 BC that would have made human beings move forward? Well, not solely forward. We'll talk about the difference between forward and not here in a minute. But could have made them move forward in a sense, right? Well, it's very important that you know it is farming, right? So farming was going to be developed in the Neolithic Revolution around 8,000 years. Well, for us right now, it would be 10,000 years ago, right? But 8,000 BC, right? So farming is going to be developed. The development of plant domestication, cultivated agriculture changed everything. Now, some of y'all are looking at this cow right here, and you're like, wait a minute, Mr. I thought that when you were talking about domestication, I thought that's animals. So you live probably with a domesticated animal, right? A domesticated animal is your dog, your cat. Cows are now domesticated. Pigs are domesticated. Chickens are domesticated. Fun fact, out of the over 120 different large base mammalia species, basically being over the large base animals, only 9 of them are domesticatable. You can only domesticate 9 different animals, right? They include different types of cows, different types of camels can be domesticated, horses can be domesticated, donkeys can be domesticated. Chickens, dogs were the very, very first ones, right? But you also can domesticate plants, and that actually came long before well, actually, there's a disagreement. Some cultural biologists believe that animal domestication came first. Some disagree, and they say plant domestication came first. There's no real way to know, all right? So some believe that if you're marking the dog as the first domesticated animal, then, like, they're right next to each other, right? But domestication is very important. What the word domestication means is, like, you're utilizing this life form for the benefit of human beings, right? And it works for you, not something against you, right? So this right here is kind of the idea of plant domestication, that I have a seed and I go out and I plant that thing, and when it grows, it will produce a vegetable or fruit that will benefit a human being, right? That's domestication. A domesticated plant is a thing I stuck in the ground, I watered it, I kept it alive, it grew, right? And some of you are like, well, you could have done that. You could have walked out into the woods and grabbed one off a tree and stuck it in the ground. What makes that so special? Well, look. The very important thing you need to understand is that plant domestication took thousands of years and a lot of different tries, right? For example, this is very important that you listen to this example. The green pea happens to be one of the most important domesticated crops ever, right? So green peas, y'all have had them, right? You've seen them, little green things come in a can. I love them personally. I think they're fantastic, right? Well, what they come in is a pea pod, right? They come in this little plant, and there's a pea pod. Sometimes they're called a bush pole pea or something like that. They come in a little pod that contains all the green peas. You crack open enough of them, you gobble them up, you eat them, right? Well, in the natural landscape, in Southwest Asia, where peas were first discovered by human beings, okay? Or not discovered, but when they found them, the problem was with these peas, they couldn't keep them from rotting. What would happen all the time in a natural landscape, when a pea pod gets hit by water, it goes, pow, and it explodes, right? It literally goes, pow, and it like shoots the peas onto the ground, and that's where the peas try to grow, and that's how the plant reproduces, right? Well, human beings eventually found some pea pods that didn't explode. They were like, oh, this plant's different. It's not exploding. Why is it doing that? Unbeknownst to those human beings at the time, these early man, or like, well, not early man, but these 8,000 BC Homo sapiens, right? They didn't realize that that was a mutated one. So every single time something is born, there is a chance that it can mutate, right? Just like the virus we're dealing with now, it can mutate the more of itself it replicates, right? So these peas they found were like little mutant peas, and they didn't blow up. So they took those because it benefited them to be able to harvest those pea pods without it exploding so they could eat them, right? They took the mutant peas and they hand planted the mutant peas because that element of that particular style of wild pea benefited humans because it didn't end up all in the dirt and stuff, right? So they started planting those, and that's what we use now, right? These actual mutated peas that were not actually doing what they're normally supposed to do in society or in the wild, right? Another great example is corn, right? Corn actually, when it was in the wild, when it was originally growing by itself in the wild, whatever, it was actually only about this big, and it was rock hard. Native Americans, though, took like ones that happened to get a little bigger and softer and planted those, and then they would get a little bigger and softer and then plant those, and then a little bigger and softer until we ended up with these large pieces of corn, right? We have manipulated and modified certain organisms to benefit us as human beings. A lot of this scare tactic stuff you'll hear in society now is like, don't eat genetically modified, blah, 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 blah. Don't eat genetically modified organisms. We've been doing it for thousands of years. Like it's not what you think it is. It's not like they're like particularly picking out certain little things. We're picking certain like things that are resistant. Oh, the Creole tomato is one of the biggest like actually selected and hybridized pieces of vegetable or plants or vegetables ever. Because that's another part of plant domestication is actually interbreeding two things together because it will like its offspring will benefit you, right? So plants and animals are going to be domesticated, which is very important. We don't know which one came first necessarily. I believe it's probably very close together. Animal domestication, though, of course, is like you're raising the animal for, it's not afraid of you, you're not hunting it, and you're raising it for food, right? So the biggest crop staple, of course, for a long time was cattle, and it was actually coming from Northern Europe and other areas like that. But plant-animal domestication is going to be a massive outcome of this farming and this Neolithic Revolution, okay? So towns and cities are then going to grow around these farms, right? These farms that are going to be created to actually harbor and keep safe these human populations are going to grow around towns and cities are going to grow around them. People are going to then also come up with specialized jobs. Now, this is very important, okay? Specialized job, I need you to write a word next to that, okay? The word, artisan, okay? A-R-T-I-S-A-N. So you see, the thing about it is we're looking at this farmer right here, and if he has domesticated plants well enough, it doesn't take all of society to farm. You only need a few farmers to benefit the growth of this town or city. So you got people that don't have anything to do, right? They're like, oh, well, I don't farm because Jim farms and he feeds us, right? So what can I do? Well, that led to specialized jobs. Artisans popped up, people who could make pots or people who could forge metal. Those were blacksmiths, right? People who could ferry animals, which is to put shoes on them, right? People who could make certain things, carpenters, stuff like that. So now that the domestication of animals and plants gave time for people to grow their skills, they began to actually grow their abilities and then began to profit off of those things, and you ended up with artisans, right? So you're starting to see the growth of human civilization. Regional trade became a big thing. If you have a town or a village over there that has stuff that you need, maybe you can swap those things back and forth. Technology, writing is a big one as well that we will bring up again when we get to Mesopotamia. And then art. Art's going to be another big thing as well. Civilizations typically tend to produce some type of art or artistic activity is very, very important. Religious activity is also a big thing as well. We don't necessarily know if farming and religion go hand in hand. However, what becomes super tied to religion? Avoiding natural disasters. Why do you want to avoid a natural disaster? Because it affects your farms. Well, if it affects your farms, you might starve, right? So, like, that's why they prayed for good crops and things like that, right? So, here's another big negative, though. See, this is why I have the word sorta right here. Humans did go forward when it comes to their abilities, right? Humans began to prosper. Humans began to get a lot better at doing things when farming happened. They became Neolithic-style people, right? But could there be massive negatives? There is an evolutionary biologist by the name of Jared Diamond who wrote a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel, and he theorizes the idea that learning how to farm is the biggest mistake that humans ever made because we have massive negatives that have come out of it. Social differentiation is a big one. You're going to have people now that have more than others. Poorer people, wealthier people. People are going to begin to hoard things to themselves. Then you're going to end up with different classes, right? And you're going to end up with this religious class, this elite class, your working class, right? So a big negative became that no one existed on that even plane, like we talked about in class, where men and women shared responsibilities that benefited their entire community, right? So you also have women are going to lose a lot of political and economic roles because their Paleolithic job was taken, right? Remember, women in Paleolithic organizations and societies, they gathered. They went out and gathered vegetables and fruits and things like that, made medicines and did other important work that benefited the men also equally as they did the hunting, right? Well, now that women aren't gathering because the food is being farmed by other men, they're now losing their political and economic viability. So you can basically say that a reduction in women's rights is actually directly conjoined to farming as well, right? So poorer nutrition also is really important. People are going to begin to rely on certain staple crops a lot more than they should. For example, corn is terrible for you. There's like no nutritional value to it, but we eat it constantly. It's in everything we eat. Our nutrition levels went down. So here's the other really big one, economic inequality, which we talked about earlier, and then I need you to put one more under there, and we're going to talk about this in class tomorrow. Disease, right? So disease, D-I-S-E-A-S-E. And so disease is a big one. We're going to talk about that a lot in class, okay? So disease. Disease is actually going to come from this farming revolution as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit in class. But I do want to go ahead and jot over this stuff so we can go ahead and get it going. But the very first civilization to ever exist is a place known as Mesopotamia, right? So the very first people to sophisticatedly farm, trade with other people, have artisans, grow their different societal classes, create art, as you can see it right here, several thousand years old, and right here, which is actually from the royal tombs of Ur, is literally a city that actually is called Ur. Now, anyway, Mesopotamia is a place, not a city. It's an area. It's a region. As you can see right here, remember that really quick. You might want to jot it down. Mesopotamia is all of this, right? This whole thing. An area that is actually settled in between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, right? And it is in what is known as modern-day Iraq, right? Any of y'all think that you can pick out where this is, where Iraq is on this map? I didn't think so. No, anyway, Iraq is right there. That is Iraq right there, and the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers run through it, right? And it is the very first civilization to develop in this grand scheme of things, and it is going to be known as the Fertile Crescent. Why is it called the Fertile Crescent? Because literally the fertile land makes the shape of a crescent moon, right? It actually goes in a crescent shape, like a croissant, all right? Now, anyway, so the big thing is the Sumerians are going to start there first, but what we're going to do, we're going to save that for class, right? We're actually going to stop right here. First civilization to develop is Mesopotamia, also known as the Fertile Crescent. But I will see you guys tomorrow. Y'all have a great one.